immigrants. Do you consciously sort of challenge yourself with every story you tell? Like, how are you thinking about the stories that you want to bring to the world, and then, of course, specifically, why the Blitz?
I think as a filmmaker, I'm interested in things which aren't seen and are visible in our everyday. The evidence is all around us, but often they don't get sort of given the platform of something like this behind me, the cinema, or the broader, wider audience of the mainstream. And particularly Blitz, I was just interested in a classical story. I was interested in again, it's a love story, really. It's a mother and son's love story, almost like a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. So there's a sort of a classical aspect of it, a very conventional aspect to it. But within that is to subvert it into a way which is things we have never seen before, or experienced before, or sort of been given a platform. I mean, that's exciting. It's exciting, and it's also simple, but it's exciting in the way of seeing. And what I mean by simple is that why hasn't it been shown before? I mean, women at a musician's factory, women at that moment were the physical backbone, the emotional backbone of the country. No one was doing the work. And the fact that we've never seen these images before, it was with me, again, it wasn't about ticking boxes, it was about telling the truth. Blitz, what was going on at that time? Children were evacuated, mothers were in factories, dealing with the sort of separation of their children, and 800,000 children were evacuated. So again, just to answer your question, I'm interested in things which sort of are just so evident, like Mickey Davis, the small gentleman. He was one of the architects of the National Health Service, and he had this amazing shelter. It's extraordinary. I mean, this is shallow mining. I mean, and also it's exciting stories, dynamic images, exciting sort of to see these women making the bomb and how tactile it was. Again, and we could go on. I'll stop me.
We're going to dig into all of those because there's a lot there. But I also just want to ask about, telling the story through the eyes of a child. In particular, was like very, gut-wrenching and powerful. Like, why did you want to tell it from that perspective?
Because I was in Basra as a war artist in 2003. I was in Iraq, and that was the first time I ever had a sense of nationalism. I was with the troops, all these regional accents, Newcastle, Scottish, sort of, Sheffield, Cardiff, whatever, all around the country. And it was the first time I ever felt a sense of nationalism. It was weird. And again, being from our side of the world, I've never experienced war. War came to me through the media. War came to me through the television, through newspapers, through how I receive my news. And to be on the ground, to be in theatre, as they say, which I believe is a romantic word for being in a war zone, I had the perverse feeling of, in a war zone, of nationalism. How is that possible? So it was just one of those things that I needed to sort of talk about and to be sober doing it. And when I found an image of that child, I was doing the research on a project called Small Acts, Orthology of Films, and I saw the image of that child on a railway station with an oversized coat and a large suitcase with a cap on, ready to be evacuated. I thought, that's my in. Again, at what point do we compromise as adults? At what point do we pretend not to see? At what point do we pretend not to listen? And as a child, it's yes or no, good and bad. And I wanted to give it over, that responsibility to the child to sort of give us some kind of understanding or to sober us as adults to what we're doing,
You found the perfect actor in Elliot. I mean, you were so good. I cannot even tell you how brilliant you were. And it was your first time acting. I mean, this is incredible. So, did you know anything about the Blitz when you started making it? Like, had you heard anything? Like, did you know where you were going to?
So I was in year 4 and I didn't know anything about the Blitz. I knew World War II was a thing, but it was just like, it happened. I didn't know anything about the Blitz. But whilst on set, I got a different learning experience than other people because the sets were so realistic. And instead of just listening to your teacher and reading books, I was actually there. And I experienced some of the things. I mean, wasn't real, but it's safe to say I learned a lot more than I would have if I wasn't on the set of Blitz.
No, I mean, so you just saw it come to life, so I think it's, you know, a bit more exciting and powerful than being in a history lesson, right? Yeah, that's amazing. Well, congratulations. So I just wanted to come back to, you know, your reasons for choosing Elliot and for telling the story through the eyes of a black boy as well. You know, the multiculturalism in the film I found to be particularly interesting, and just, you know, I felt that it was like a gap in my own knowledge of what was happening in that time. So I'd love for you to sort of flesh out the you know, the sort of exploration of race and multiculturalism in the movie.
Well, you know, I was working with some researchers. I was working with the Imperial War Museum, the people who sent me to Iraq in 2003, as well as our historical advisor, Joshua Levine, who wrote The Secret History of the Blitz. And in the research, what was interesting about the research is so, you know, it's kind of evident that, you know, there was a large Chinese community, large, you know, black community. You know, London, central London, as Joshua said, was cosmopolitan. It was not unusual to see anyone of colour. And it's kind of interesting in the sense of the way of what depictions of wartime and London at that time, you know, it's, you know, again, you know, if we don't do it, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it. Why? I have no idea. I mean, you know, you have to ask yourself that question. This is how London looked. You know, there were three, if you know London, if anyone knows Seven Dials, I think there's off Seven Dials, there were 3 black clubs, for example. You know, Ife, you know, Love. You know, he was a guy called Itai Epiton. He patrolled around the Marylebone area. That speech that he said that was given on the screen, that actually happened. People were trying to divide the actual shelter. So most of these stories, if not all, are based on historical accuracy. I knew I had to be. I knew I had to get that because people ask, well, did it really happen? Was that like that? Really? Because of the circumstance of bringing people of colour and women into the front 4 of the movie. You know, again, this has never happened before. Why haven't I seen this film before? So it's not like, it's actually using the classical nature of storytelling to tell a completely different story. I mean, you know, he's an Oliver Twist. You know, he is, you know, he's George Hemingway. He sees an apple differently to Oliver would. Do you know what I mean? He is seen differently to how Oliver would. The environment is different. So to get a sense of what was going on in that time, we were not just fighting our enemies, we were fighting ourselves, as well as everything else. It was exciting to sort of, it was like, again, in a weird way, in some ways you could say, for certain people it would be like science fiction, but it was a reality. I mean, again, it's, one last thing, it's like cowboys and Indians, and you find that Native Americans aren't the bad guys.
Right, powerfully said. So, just to talk a little bit more about the casting. You mentioned, alluded earlier to the women who were in the factories and who were making bombs, and I found Saoirse's role to be particularly powerful. Like, it was great to see a woman in a war movie, but as a sort of strong character and not just a sort of wilting flower waiting for her husband to come back from war. And so, I'm curious about why you wanted Saoirse in particular, what you felt that she would bring to it that you were trying to get across.
Well, there's this sort of, I love the independence of this, of Saoirse. There's a certain kind of robustness, and sort of again, for more than a better word, an earthiness about it. But she's an artist first and foremost. And what I loved about her was having these conversations with her before I cast her. Before I cast her, I was having a conversation with her, because one of the things I had to realize was to find out is could she sing. And I never forgot the phone call I got from the singing coach when she was asked to sort of do the singing coach. She goes, she's amazing, and it's only going to get better. And I was like, thank goodness gracious. And of course, what was amazing about it, having this conversation with her before was about her and her mother. Her and her mother were like it was a double act. It was just her and her mother. So there's this beautiful, intimate relationship with her and her mother. You know, it was just her and her mother. So talking to her about George, she kind of understood it, because it's the first time she would play her mother. And then when she met Elliot, it was amazing, because she took him under her wing. Didn't she, Elliot? You were talking about that? Saoirse, and you?
So, the first time I met Saoirse, I was really shy, but she was really, like, caring, even though I had only just met her, and it's like we instantly clicked. And even though she's way older than me, we were at the same age, and she was like a mum on set at the same time. For me and Saoirse, she was just my best friend, my best friend.
That comes through in the movie, like it feels like your best friends, that she's your mum, but she's your best friend. So, like, I felt that come across. You really did a great job with that.
Yeah, it was, again, there was a naturalism to it. There was, I mean, one of the most important scenes in the movie came out of them playing together, just, you know, fooling around. Because again, Saoirse was channeling her mother, but she was just also playing. She did things and stuff, little things, you know, little things. And then at one point, it caught my eye that we were rehearsing, we could do a scene. I hadn't written it, I pretended I did, but I hadn't written it yet. But just thinking, I knew something would happen. And all of a sudden, Saoirse sort of, you know, takes the eyelash from Elliot's eye and says, "Make a wish." And I said, "Do that, whoa, do that again. Let's have that, let's play with that again, let's do that again." And it was just so gorgeous. You can't make that kind of stuff up, the chemistry up on screen. And also with Paul Weller, when Paul came in, he plays Gerald. He's a musician, originally, if you don't know, Paul Weller is a very famous musician in the UK. He's a 66-year-old man. You have Saoirse, 29, you have Elliot, 9 years old. And, you know, it was like kids playing, you know, it was like, come on guys, we're going to actually film it. But that chemistry was real, it was beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt that. So you just said that you really wanted to ensure that Saoirse could sing. So you had already planned for her to sing, and you'd written the song. Like, so you co-wrote this song. Like, what can't you do? But anyway, no. So you co-wrote the song, and so that was something that you had planned for.
It's just the immediacy of life. Sometimes, you know, again, my father died 18 years ago, and I got his winter coat. I got his winter coat, and it was a sheepskin coat, and I just felt the whole idea of putting on a coat and almost like an embrace, the presence but the absence of someone, and that person could be all around you. I just thought that could be a beautiful thing for a song, and Nicholas Britell worked with him on it, and it was a beautiful thing. And we were in Abbey Road doing it, and you know, sometimes you just get inspired just by love and loss, you know.
And so you also, so she sings, but you also have a lot of musicians in the film. So you mentioned Paul Weller, and that was also his first time acting. So you just cast him because, you know, you loved his work, and you just felt that, you know, what you'd seen of him as a musician, you felt he could sort of bring something to the role.
Absolutely. No, I mean, Paul, I think he was a bit, at first he said, "Really?" I said, "Paul, I think you could do this." And again, it's just a bit of encouragement, but at the same time, he has something to say. There's a certain grace, a gravitas to him, which I needed, of course, for it to pay off at the end, and a caring, because these guys loved each other. You know, it was, you know, I wanted to be in that family. You know, I wish I had that. I didn't have that. I wish I had that family. You know, it was beautiful. It was just gorgeous. So, yeah, what can I tell you? Yeah. And again, you know, Paul, you know, has many children, 8 children, and he has black children, he has white children. He has all kind. He's an understanding of the situation as well, which is very, very important. Someone's got a sports game going on. Go for it. Never mind. It's okay.
And then there's also the amazing Benjamin Clementine, who. I think for me, one of the parts of the movie that I felt the most emotional about actually was the relationship between Ife and George. You know, I'm the mother of a 12-year-old, and I think there were some parallels to my own son's experience, and so I found that particularly powerful. And I'm curious about like how he came to the role and what you felt. Saw in him.
I met Benjamin about 7 years ago. This beautiful sort of man. He's very odd, and he's very different. You know, he comes in and he kind of floats into the room. He's like a sort of I don't know, there's something very odd about him. It's beautiful. I remember my mum meeting for the first time. I got an award, and my mother never does it. She started, "Where'd you get those from?" Touch his cheekbones. Mum. It was like, because of course, he's extraordinarily gorgeous, but at the same time, there's something beautiful about him. He's open, you know, in a way, almost like a child. I think you two got on wonderfully, didn't you? You were always holding hands. It was weird. It was like wonderful. I mean, it was like two children. One happens to be like 6'2", the other one happens to be about down there. Anyway, with Benjamin, there was a sense of love. I mean, you know, Ife, you know, whatever, you know, his Ivory Coast, Ghana at the time, you know, but brought up in Nigeria. There was a very wonderful thing in some ways of these souls. You know, this England, Britain, London is full of people that are forgotten. They came, they made an impression, they made an indent, but they're no longer known or referenced. They're the people and the things that get slip in between the words of history books. And it was my honor to sort of give him a platform. You know, his middle name was Ite Epithon. He patrolled the Marylebone area. And I said before, that speech he gave was real. It was real. And I think he was such a soul, beautiful man. I mean, perfumed the air with love. You know, and I don't get embarrassed by saying that, because I think all we need right now is a bit of love. And again, I have to sort of sometimes, oh God, Steve, don't be too corny, but it's important. I've been there. I've done films where it's been. If you see my movies, you know what I've done, and you know, again, and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes love is just as powerful.
I mean, I think that speech he gave obviously wouldn't be out of place in the times we're in right now. So, okay, so Elliot, I want to ask you. There were parts in the movie where I was really afraid for you. You were jumping off trains, running across train tracks. You were swimming under gates in, you know, train stations. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about the stunts? Like, did you become very friendly with the stunt team, or like, what was? Yeah, tell me some more.
Yeah, the stunt team were like my best friends as well. I think I could say just everyone was my best friend.
Everyone was your best friend.
So they made it safe, if anyone's wondering, and fun, especially the flood scene. I mean, some people might have been scared, but I was 9, and the thought of drowning and being pushed by jets was just so cool. But sadly, I didn't get to jump off a train.
No. You did. That was there's one. The wide shot was the only time you didn't. Other times you did all the shot. Come on, you know that one time you didn't do one stunt, and I had to stop the guy from jumping. Would you believe? Because that one you can't do. Just one. Everything else was you.
Everything else was you?
Everything.
Yep.
Wow. Any bruises to show for it?
Nope.
No. Okay. You're very, very
Take
impressed.
very good care of our kids. Stars.
Let's talk a little bit more about just the visual aspect of the film, and you know, and the sort of the production design. Like, you reunited with Adam Stockhausen. So like, I'd love to, you know, for you to sort of talk a little bit more about, like, you know, what were the conversations you were having about, like, what you wanted to get across, and what you wanted the sort of visuals to feel like.
It was a texture, because England, you know, Britain, texture. You know, again, smoke, the smoke of bombs falling, the soot. You know, the Industrial Revolution, as far as the atmosphere, the dirt, the grime, but also depth. So, talking to Adam Stockhausen, the designer, I wanted as much real sets as possible, and much real and then we travel the country looking for the right place. We shot in Hull, we shot in Liverpool, we shot elsewhere, and of course in London. And we did this massive build, of course, for the train station, the floods, which is extraordinary, and of course the engineering feat went into that with the water. Could you imagine? With the extras, who were extraordinary, and with, you know, my DP, your director soul. What I wanted was a movie which was, you know, at a certain point it became an assault, because again, you know, and no time to breathe and moving. Because if you notice the last half an hour of the picture, there's hardly anyone says anything, just moving, and anxiety and the sound design. Because that's cinema for me. I want you to be on the edge of your chair. I want you to be, you know, holding your breath, and then give you the reward of your attention. Tone and then release. But this is all about visualization and pacing and storytelling. But the most important thing was to give people, you have to, for me at least, in this particular movie, I needed to give people a handle. So therefore, to give a classical narrative is in a way is to have people feel safe, but at the same time make them very, very scared, because at the same time they haven't seen certain things before. But not just sort of scared as in sort of having the thrills and spills, but in the sense of way of introducing them. It allows you, you know, again, if you come into a situation where you introduce something to people in a way which is sort of fairly familiar, they're more likely to sort of lean into it.
I mean, I would say a great example of that was the Café de Paris scene.
Yes.
Right? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, that's great, because again, this is something that hasn't been seen before, you know, and in some ways it's the perversity of that. You know, we were at a time where there was a situation where there's rations going on. But at the same time, there's people living, the life of Riley, you know. But at the same time, there was a sexual revolution going on at that time, because people thought, well, we're going to die anyway, let's go for it. And so there was an openness. I mean, the gentleman, the band leader, was a guy called Snake Hip Johnson. He actually existed, the band leader. He based himself on Cab Calloway. He was an openly gay man, living with a very sort of rich English man at the time. This cafe, it's such an interesting club, that space, because there was so many things going on. So therefore, I just want to give you a spice of life. And actually, when the bomb dropped on that particular, again, oh Johnny, basically it's a woman called singing about having an orgasm, oh Johnny, At that point, the bomb dropped on the club when they played that song, historical accurate. Yeah, and therefore the aftermath is limbo. Oh goodness gracious, there's a child in the audience. Anyway, adults were having fun at that point in the song. Moving on. And then the bomb dropped, and again, what happened with the people on the ground at the Café Paris, the aftermath, the limbo, life and death, actually happened. They didn't know who was who. People's fingers were decapitated. Rings jewelry was taken. I mean, it's war. And it's again an image which had, and why do, it's not just putting propaganda out there, also some stereotyped images. It's about putting images out there which is about how people survive in a situation of war.
So I understand so much more now why you wanted everything to be sort of rooted in fact.
Because they will question us.
Right.
Did that happen? Are you sure there are black people there? Are you sure there are women there? Are they sure there are Chinese people there? Are you sure there was gay people so open? Because people didn't care. There was war going on. The liberation of sexuality, sexual liberation, people didn't care. It's like Quentin Crisp. He lived there. He told you the story of what was going on during the wartime in London. It's a very interesting time,
And it's not also your first time really sort of coming to this, because I also learned in the course of my research that you were the official war artist at the Imperial War Museum.
Yeah, I mean that's in some ways that's in some ways the sort of the starting point of this. In 2003, I became official war artist. I went to Baghdad. I went to Iraq and Basra with the British troops, and I was embedded with them. And again, that was the first time I ever. I mean, look, as I said, it's interesting for us. How, in this part of the world, how we know war is through the media, how we sort of engage with war is through the media, television screens or newspapers or whatever. But I, as a civilian, was on the ground in a war zone, in theatres, they call it. So it's a romantic idea of theatre, what they call it, to be in war. And being around the troops from all over the country of the United Kingdom, from Newcastle, Sheffield, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Cardiff, all over, again. And having those regional accents, I felt a sense of camaraderie. For the first time, I felt a sense of nationalism. And it was kind of perverse at the same time, because it was in a war zone. The first time I ever had that kind of feeling was at war. And I think that was the starting point of me wanting to sort of make a movie about the Blitz in the UK, war in the UK. And again, what was so important for me again was I wanted to look at the people who had to survive the war. The people who had to deal with the everyday, not the people who had to make the decisions, but the consequences of the people who had to live with their decisions. What was it like? How did you survive? How do you deal with your child being sort of shipped off to you don't know where, and you don't know when they're coming back. You don't know where they are. You didn't know where they are. You know, again, and also the trauma of that. The trauma of that, Liz, with the UK today, keep calm and carry on, sip up a lip, all that business. Because people didn't talk about it, but you know, the evidence of that trauma has come out in many ways. You know, this is, again, and also, you know, again, I have to say, as an artist right now, I feel very sort of, I feel very useful in the sense of where, unfortunately, how we find ourselves today, you know? And having this movie out at this time, it's become actually more urgent than I would have ever, well, I'll be honest with you, in the whole of history, human history, it's always been urgent, but in this particular time, it seems like the world's on fire. So to be here with this gentleman, with this film right now, I can't say I'm more happy to sort of have my hands, at least our little hands on the steering wheel, trying to shift a view.
I mean, just thinking about that and the sort of urgency of now of having this film, you know, sort of available to people now. And then, you know, I'd read that you felt when you were making 12 Years a Slave that you didn't think it would have been made had Obama not been president. Like you felt that they were sort of inextricably linked. And so it's interesting to sort of fast forward to now. Not just in terms of the political turmoil, but also, you know, with Kamala Harris, you know, running for president, and like, do you see any sort of parallels in like how?
Well, I think it's about decisions, isn't it? You know, again, like I said, it's like, you know, at what point do we stop listening, and when do we stop sort of you know, seeing or pretending not to, or whatever it is. It's a case of opening our eyes and doing the right thing. I think that's so important right now. You know, it's so much craziness is going on, and again, yes, our film echoes that with the shelter and the divide, us fighting ourselves, so busy fighting ourselves, and you know, fighting our enemies. It's kind of interesting how, yes, it does echo that. I mean, we knew, but at the same time, it's so simple in this gentleman's face. I mean, it's this little boy's face. It's simple. It's not that difficult. It's not that confusing. It's not that, you know, complicated. It's right and wrong, good and bad. That's what it is, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that.
So Elliot, what do you think? So you just made, you know, a really important film about war, you know, as a kid. Like, when people go and see this film, like, what message do you want to send them? Like, what do you want them to feel or think after they've seen the film?
Want them to understand what this film is about. It's really about love and the power of love, and when we're put into a situation where we have to work together, we have to work together. Like, the film is during World War II, and that's exactly what Hitler is doing, and that's what Ife said in his speech. When we're banded together, we need to work together, not work against each other.
So well said. And I would love that, as we wrap up, I'd love that. I'd love to pose the same question to you, Steve.
I can't top that. I mean, it's coming from his mouth. That's what the movie's about.
Well, this is a really, you know, such a powerful film. I wish you, you know, obviously every success as you travel talking about it. And I think it was, you know, certainly there were so many revelations for me about that time, and you know, and about the sort of makeup of Britain at that time. So I thank you for making the film, and Elliot, congratulations on that.